with Tom. Turn your dial to cable 18. You will see the best in TV. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Sit back and listen. You will hear the best conversation of the year. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom.
Tom, I'm Tom Dacey alongside Ed McCarver. Hello, Edward.
Hello, Tommy. Good to see you once again with a live studio audience and very energetic here. All right, that'll be fine. All right. We're surprised they're not booing us, but one young man let his feelings known. But despite what he said, it's still good to be back here at NHTV.
Well, I might want to say that today about your New York Jets.
Oh, actually, the Jets, and maybe we should say it about the National Football League in general with these replacement referees. First of all, the Jets did squish the fish, which all of us expected. So
Not all of us.
But how'd you like to be a Green Bay Packer fan after what happened last night?
I heard.
So yeah, just I didn't see the game because I usually go to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm not as young as everybody else in here, but yeah, the replacement referees. It's all I heard on WFAN and all the other sports networks that they're killing them. So
I guess that was one of several calls over the last 2 weeks.
Yep. This weekend, especially the third week of replacement referees, I think there was a clip of Bill Belichick went to look like attack one of the officials after a game on Sunday night, and one of the other coaches, I think one of the Harbaughs, went to one of the referees for something. But it's starting to get out of hand, and we'll see what happens. But replacement referees or no replacement referees, our beloved New York Jets are in first place in the AFC East. So if the Super Bowl were played tomorrow, as they say, the New York Jets might well be in it.
Well, as you know, you beat my Miami Dolphins on Sunday.
It was a tough game. It was an overtime game, and I think you called me in the fourth quarter, and I wanted to let it go to voicemail, but my charming wife picked up the phone and said, "It's Tom." So we chatted for a little bit, but it was. And I understand you had a good weekend too. You headed up north.
Yes. As you know, I didn't get to see the game on Sunday because I was at the Big E in West Springfield with the young adults group from United Cerebral Palsy.
Nice.
And I got to say, though, this year was the worst year I ever had at the Big E.
Why is that?
Never had an issue like this before, but we were actually stuck in traffic. As soon as we hit the Massachusetts line, we were in traffic for over 2 hours.
Oh.
We did not get into the Big E. We arrived there at 2:30, and we actually walked inside after 3, and it was just wall-to-wall people.
And it was all traffic because of the Big E.
Yes,
Oh,
and of course our cameraman John was with me. We couldn't even go into any of the state buildings because they were wall-to-wall people. I tried to go into the Connecticut building. That was the only one I actually made it into. But I actually had people behind me because of being wall-to-wall people. I'm going real slow with my wheelchair because I didn't want to hit anybody. I actually had people behind me going, "Can't this guy move any faster?"
Oh, really?
And then then you know, trying to get through, you say, excuse me," and they're still standing there. And then if you hit them, they turn around and give you a dirty look. So you know, I actually didn't really enjoy the experience that much this year, but I hope they do something next year to improve that because.
We had only been to the Big E once a couple of years ago, and I remember we drove up. It was a downpour. It was pouring rain that day, and we dressed with the weather gear and all that, and we got there. And even though it was pouring rain, there was nobody there, and it actually was kind of pleasant because we were able to go to the different exhibits, and we went to under the circus tent. They had a circus event, and I was thinking it might be a good trade-off to have, inclement weather but no crowds, rather than perfect weather like you had Sunday, but yet just too many people.
We were actually laughing going up in the van because we're stuck in traffic, and there's a guy alongside of us driving a Maserati convertible. And I was actually laughing because we're thinking, oh yeah, I bet you he thought he was going to get there a lot faster driving that car. How do you feel now?
Well, it is the season. We're always sad to see the summer go, but it is fair season now, and I know you had a good time at the North Haven Fair, and thank you for giving me the time off for the Jets' first game. So thank you for doing that. And of course, the Durham Fair, the Southington Apple Harvest Festival, and of course, Celebrate Wallingford.
Which we'll be doing.
Doing again this year.
In about another week.
Yep, October 6th and 7th, so we look forward to that. So while we're sorry that the weather gets cooler and the days get shorter, it is a most fun time of year, early September.
But as I usually say about this time, Ed, have you done your homework?
Yes, I have, young man.
With Ed's Humor News, take it away, Goob.
Thank you, Tommy. Well, Tommy, a flock of 80 sheep invaded a sporting goods store in an Australian ski resort. We think one of them saw its reflection in a mirror and came in to investigate, said a spokesperson for the store. And being sheep, of course, the rest of them decided to follow. Lawyers are now negotiating with the flock's owners over damage to stock, which ran into the thousands. Good thing it wasn't a wildebeest. Well, a South Carolina woman found her former boyfriend secretly living in her attic 12 years after they split up. The mother of 5, who was only identified as Tracy, discovered the man living in a heating duct. She said one night she heard a thump, then, quote, all the nails just popped out of the ceiling over my bed. Tracy sent her nephew to check out the sounds. When he found the 44-year-old man curled up in the heating duct, the man bolted before police arrived. Tracy added the man had been in and out of jail since the breakup about a dozen years ago. Well, with its infamous long lines, going to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get your license is usually nothing to smile about. Well, these days, in New Jersey, there is a mandatory no big smiles policy for license photos. New Jersey motorists have had to maintain neutral expressions because of new face recognition software, according to officials. In addition, eyes are requested to remain open and no glasses may be worn. Using the facial recognition technology as part of New Jersey's efforts to go through 19 million photo records to catch duplicates and scammers who may be attempting to create a new identity. As one motor vehicle spokesperson said, please don't give us your, I just won $5 million in the lottery smile. Finally, Tom, and assemble a guest, except for that young man right there. Alison Whalen from England climbed into a moored double-decker ferry boat, untied it from the dock, and sailed away as she screamed, I'm Jack Sparrow, and I'm a pirate. Officials say the woman had been drinking prior to boarding the vessel. She taunted police from the water, saying, what are you going to do now? And I believe this is out of your jurisdiction. It took about 1 hour to catch Ms. Whalen. She later pled guilty to, quote, aggravated vehicle taking and was sentenced to 112 days in prison. Apparently, walking the plank is not a punishment for would-be pirates in Britain. And that's a look at some oddballs.
Great job, as always, Edward.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
At this time, what do you say we welcome our guest? It is my pleasure, first of all, to welcome to the NHTV family. We have a new show which debuted a few weeks ago called The Squared Circle for all you wrestling fans. At this time, I'd like to officially welcome as our guest, no stranger to the North Haven audience.
Oh, of course not.
Known as Hollywood J. Williams.
Hollywood. Let's hear it for Hollywood J.
Hollywood.
Next to Jay, we have John Zimmerman. Welcome, fellas.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
I want to start out by asking both of you, how long have you been following wrestling?
I've been following professional wrestling. I'm 36 years old now. I've been following it since I'd say I was about 5, 6 years old. My mother was a huge wrestling fan growing up, and I remember the WWF back then from about 1984, 85 onward, shortly after Hulk Hogan became the champion.
I can remember watching it with my grandfather and grandmother, midnights on Saturday night, staying up late, or being woken up right before it came on. In the days of Haystacks Calhoun, in the days of black and white, and of course we were fans. The old New Haven Coliseum, going there for like $5, which is roughly the cost of a movie at the time, and seeing Bob Backlund when he was champion prior to the Hulk Hogan era, and just seeing Don Morocco. And the early days with Coco Beware, and then of course Hogan comes in and the British Bulldogs. So being around 12 years old, 11 years old, being really into it and seeing it on a monthly basis at New Haven Coliseum.
And of course, for all you die-hard wrestling fans, that's Mr. Bob Backlund.
Glastonbury, Connecticut's own Bob Backlund, if I'm not mistaken. He is a Connecticut resident. Jay, I wanted to ask you, besides wrestling, you are also a veteran of the public access circuit. You've had shows on other networks other than NHTV, although you did get your start here, is that correct?
I did get my start here at NHTV back in 1995 on a show called In the Ring with a guy named Walter Mann. Everybody knows Walt. And the late, great Bob McGuire, our third co-host. That when that went off the air, branched out into my own. Under the production of Mr. Thomas Dacey here, we created Ringside Seat, myself, and Stone Cold Steve Cundy. And after that, I've been on other shows. I've been on, we had Ringside Seat was done out of Channel 21 in Brantford, actually, as well as in addition to here at NHTV.
Now, was that back in the days, was it Rollins Cablevision back then?
That it's going back a little further. It was TCI Cablevision.
Okay.
And I believe it might have changed hands after that. I had a show called Inside Wrestling, which I did out of Channel 21 in Brantford, and with a co-host named Dave Giannotti, the Great One we used to call him. And over here in North Haven, Dave and I did the same basic thing. We just called it Turnbuckle Talk because it was done over here in North Haven. I wanted there to be I wanted to have a different name because it was North Haven, a little differentiation, if you will.
That's a great title, Turnbuckle Talk.
Oh, yeah. It was,
I like that.
We had a good run. Dave was actually my last co-host. I went through several co-hosts with Turnbuckle Talk and Inside Wrestling. He ended up being my last one. And we had a good run. We signed off in 2001. Break rank a little bit. The job I was working at, don't tell anybody I actually work. Moved out of state, and I took a new job which required me to work second shift hours, and I had to sort of go into retirement, unfortunately, and I never thought I'd actually be back doing public access ever again. Broadcasting is actually still a dream of mine. I'd actually love to do something with a TV, working for a TV station eventually. I'm in another line of work. But I never actually thought I'd be back involved with public access until it was almost a year ago. I guess we might as well mention him, Michael Canada.
A.K.A. Mr. Trivia.
A.K.A. Mr. Trivia called me up, got a hold of me, and my good friend Bob.
Bad News Bob.
Bad News Bob, who incidentally just moved away from the state of Connecticut to beautiful, sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. He contacted the two of us and asked us if we would be on his new wrestling show as guests. Guests turned out to be co-hosts, and even though I'm no longer there, I've went out and started my own thing yet again. I mean, I'll give credit where credit is due. I mean, he's the one that called me up, and if it wasn't for that, maybe I still wouldn't be involved.
So you were able to like re-jumpstart your career
Yeah.
after that phone call.
Yeah,
Nice.
you know, and now I'm glad to be back, and I'm not going anywhere. The Squared Circle's not going anywhere. This is one of my contributors here.
Yeah, John, why don't you tell us how you...
I've got more of a radio background. I trained at WNHU at the University of New Haven, and I had my own show there for a while. And I worked for several DJ companies. So I have more of a radio and announcing background. And I've been on several TV shows here and there. I was on Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher. I was on the precursor to The Daily Show. Jon Stewart had a show which he filmed out in New York, which was actually aired in Britain. And I had been on there several times. I've been on SNY, I've been on Yes Network, I've been on Nesson, several of the sports stations. But primarily, I like the radio medium. I'm more of a music guy, but wrestling's never leaves your blood. Once you're into it.
WNHU, we should say, is the University of New Haven's
That's correct.
station.
Yes.
90 point...
88.7.
88.7
Yes.
on the dial, so...
Yeah, way on the left.
Good.
So,
Good.
yeah.
Not politically, or just... no, on the dial.
Maybe at times. They do have a variety of programming.
You can join in the conversation here with Hollywood J. Williams and John Zimmerman, talk about wrestling or,
Give us a call.
Or anything. Give us a call, 203-234-0025, 203-234-0025.
Our crack staff. As we always say.
Yeah. And one of the good ones, Eric.
Eric Carlson
behind
working in the
scenes.
back.
Yep.
Jay, I also want to mention you also have another co-host. You want to mention your other co-host who couldn't be here tonight?
Yeah, his name is Jordan Izzo. I've known Jordan for a few years. I know I knew he told me one day he had not really experience doing live television, but he was educated, went to broadcasting school in New York, and when I decided to start this new venture called the Squared Circle, he was actually the first person I thought of due to his scholastic background in the field, I should say. I knew he told me he'd never been on live television, so he was a little nervous walking into a few weeks ago on September 10th, but to tell you the truth, he pulled it off great. And Jordan actually knows John here, and John and I, believe it or not, we only met on September 10th.
Yeah.
About an hour and a half before we went on the air.
Debut episode of the
Yep.
Squared Circle,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
I think it worked out great. You can see it on our Facebook page. There's a link to the first episode, and we're looking forward to the next episode. We've got a lot of great stuff lined up.
Ed, why don't you ask him who came up with the name The Squared Circle?
Say, fellas, who came up with the name Squared Circle?
We were thinking about different names to call the show, and the guy named Tom Dacey.
Oh, no, what do you want me to
He
ask?
goes,
There you go. That was a loaded question.
why don't you call it the Squared Circle? And
I
Tom's
love
a
Turnbuckle
genius.
Talk, too.
I was originally going to bring back the Turnbuckle Talk brand, and then Jordan was like, "Nah, let's do something else."
Well, you're right. You said Tom is a genius, and
Oh, yeah.
he reminds me of that every week when we come down here, or every month when we come down here. You mentioned you became a wrestling fan in the 80s. John, you mentioned Haystacks Calhoun, and I remember him when I was considerably younger, back in those days. But even from the 80s to now, and I'll let each of you elaborate on it. How has wrestling changed?
Wrestling
If it has.
changed. Well, wrestling changed.
Big time.
Starting with the Hogan era, it became a business. It became big money. With the first WrestleMania, Vince found out that it could be global, and now he actually is global, and he's shown.
By Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, actually, because his dad had started the company, and it was regionalized then, and you had fellas that moved around the regions, but overall you had, each territory had their own stars, and you got to see like the same guys over and over. And as Vincent Kennedy McMahon took over and he started buying out the other properties, you got to see more and more talent. And with more talent, you had more people watching, because then you had all of the regions watching, not just the Northeast area. And the advent of cable and definitely the pay-per-view, it made it more of a global market. So once the big money started coming in, you had to have more of a spectacular. So then you had the fireworks, and you had more of a storyline, and there were writers rather than just two guys just socking it out in the ring. There was more storyline, because you had more television time to fill, and you had to come up with more content.
Yeah, back in the day, I can remember you had your superstars of wrestling on Saturday mornings. Wrestling Challenge was on Sunday mornings.
Yep. Saturday night main event once in a while.
Saturday night's main event once in a while, but you didn't have Raw. You had primetime wrestling with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, and all he would do is just show clips of different matches from around the country. And there wasn't a ratings war back then. WCW had their programming on Saturday nights at 6:05. In fact, it didn't even start out being called WCW. It was NWA. And
Was that Ted Turner when he tried to?
That was Jim Crockett, and then Ted Turner ultimately bought Jim Crockett Promotions out.
Ted Turner saw the opportunity that Vince had taken advantage of, and Ted Turner had, obviously, he had his own networks, and it didn't cost him anything to put the show on the air.
Now, what time frame are we talking now when Ted Turner started?
We are
Is this
talking the mid-'90s.
90s.
By the time he really hit with
Yeah.
WCW, and that became the Monday Night Wars.
Monday Night Wars, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say he bought it around 92, 93, and then Nitro debuted in 1995, and that went opposite the only 2-year-old at that time Monday Night Raw.
And Turner had brought in a former announcer, a former stagehand, and then became a backstage announcer, a fellow by the name of Eric Bischoff. And Eric Bischoff came up with a lot of the innovative ways to market WCW at the time, and he lured, with Ted Turner's money, he lured a lot of the WWF talent away from Vince and brought it over. And because Turner owns the network, he could put it on 5 minutes before the hour.
Yep.
Whereas Vince was dealing with other network television, stations that were strictly on the hour. So by starting 5 minutes ahead, which doesn't seem like a lot, you already had the other
It doesn't
fans.
seem like a lot to most people, but
Right, you had the fans locked in. Once you had the fans in on you can keep them there. So once they were in at 5 minutes to the hour, people weren't changing over to a different station. Bischoff and Turner really, changed the industry. And at the time, Vince was doing Monday Night Raw as a tape delay. And he was filming it ahead of time, and Bischoff had come out at 5 minutes to the hour. Well, I'm going to tell you what's going on the other show, so you don't have to watch it. And he would come out and tell you what was going to happen on Raw. Okay, now that we've got that aside, we're going to show our show. So then Vince had to go live, which actually turned out to be a great thing. And the Monday Night Wars really pushed both businesses, both Turner
And was it better for the
and
fan
Vince.
too? You were getting
Oh,
better
absolutely.
quality matches?
Absolutely.
It brought out the best in both companies. I mean, and for a while there, WCW was actually winning when they took Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
When they signed Scott Hall and Kevin Nash away from the WWF, and they brought them in, and there was a lot of mystery. They were doing this storyline like it was a wrestling organization within a wrestling organization. These band of vigilantes coming in out of nowhere.
If I may, Scott Hall, if Razor Ramon?
Razor Ramon.
Yes.
Yes.
And
You are correct, sir.
Diesel?
Diesel.
That's correct. Wow.
I just pulled that out of the air.
They came in and they said they had a third person with them, and they meant business, and they were there to take over the company. And the third person ended up being Hulk Hogan, turning heel.
Which surprised everybody, because Hulk Hogan was the top guy for the WWF at the time. He was the money draw, and nobody expected that he would leave Vince. And Vince, and Hogan were, like salt and pepper,
Oh yeah.
and you couldn't have one without the other. And Vince made Hulk, and Hulk made Vince, and you couldn't have had it. You know, it was one of those things where the stars lined up, and you had the right guy on the money end, you had the right guy in the ring with the talent, and you know, the mic ability and the likability. You know, he's still loved by, you know, by all the fans, and he's still a worldwide phenomena wherever you go. I mean, when you say wrestling outside of the United States, the first person that comes to mind for most people is Hulk Hogan.
And if I recall, he started out as a villain.
Yes, he did.
Originally, he started out as a villain.
I think was it Bob Backlund he helped, and then he changed. He changed to good. I'm trying to think because I remember.
He started out as a villain, but that you're going back probably in the late '70s or early '80s, and then when if I remember my history, Backlund lost the belt to the Iron Sheik, and then that's when Hulk Hogan came in and defeated the Iron Sheik for the WWF title, and that's when Hulkamania was born.
And I remember the Iron Sheik with a name I'm sure everybody, Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
They had a series of classic matches.
Well, the Hulk Hogan coming out with "I Am a Real American" and Sergeant Slaughter waving the American flag during the Gulf War was a major turning point, and they did take advantage of the patriotism. And you know, Hulk Hogan standing up for America and what it stands for, and eat your vitamins and say your prayers to all the little kids, and it began the whole phenomena with the marketing, and you know, the toy business really took off, and you know, they found that there was a kids market, and then that began all of the characters marketed toward kids with the colorful costumes, and then the British Bulldogs came out with a dog, and then you had Coco Beware come out with a parrot, and
Frankie.
You know, yes. So I mean, it became a marketing,
The British
ploy.
Davy Boy Smith.
Davy Boy Smith.
I do.
And the Dynamite Kid.
And Dynamite Kid.
Right.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to ask, you were talking about storylines just a few moments ago. I've noticed recently that there's been quite a similarity now. Have you noticed that TNA is actually picking up on some of the WWE storylines?
I think TNA is doing everything they can just to stay in business, and if they if they have to like look at the WWE product and try to this is what they feel in their mind that they might need to do. I'm gonna tell everybody what's really going on with TNA. It's they're owned by an oil company. Dixie Carter, who's the president of TNA, her father actually is the one that owns the company. Now you think about it, you're thinking about a wrestling promotion being owned by someone that's not in the entertainment business.
Well, this
It doesn't
right.
really make too much sense.
Well, with that, it's a repeat of the Ted Turner days, because Ted Turner had no idea. He wasn't in, the wrestling business. He could.
No.
There's a story that Ted Turner called up Vince McMahon and says, "Hey, I just bought WCW. I'm in the wrestling business," and Vince says, "That's great because I'm in the entertainment business."
Exactly.
And Turner, Turner himself didn't have any hands-on experience with wrestling or the wrestling entertainment business. And Bischoff took over, and Bischoff was like a fanboy that got to live his dream. And what's going on with TNA in recent years, TNA hired former WWE writers to come up with their storylines. So you're seeing a lot of repetition, that they're just churning out what had been done years ago in the WWE.
Exactly.
Because you had, one of the head writers was Vince Russo, who was recently let go from TNA. But Vince Russo was a key element of the Attitude Era for WWE.
And Vince Russo came up with characters like Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Absolutely.
And The Rock.
And so now he comes over to TNA, and you're seeing a lot of, watered down, but a lot of rehash of what was going on in the WWE. On the other side, WWE hired former daytime soap opera writers. So now we're getting into the soap opera land. And I've always said that wrestling, the appeal, it's soap opera for men.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's soap opera.
Now it really is becoming a soap.
Right.
I think sooner or later, I think Raw and SmackDown are going to be replayed on soap.
I mean, I
Oh,
mean,
without a
because
doubt.
like I'm saying, I just noticed this similarity the other night. I mean, CM Punk's whole gimmick right now with respect. And then the other night I'm watching TNA, and here's Tara in the ring, and she says, respect. I want respect. And I'm like, oh, there's a CM Punk ripoff.
Imitation is the
Yeah.
sincerest form of flattery.
I think what TNA needs to do is I think the Carters need to sell it to somebody that's actually in the entertainment business, because then they'll hire writers that'll actually think for themselves, and you won't see a lot of the repetition anymore. They're gonna have to just be original. They're gonna have to try to be better than Vince McMahon with being owned by an entertainment company.
Well,
it's going to be really hard to do.
I think that competing with WWE at this point is out of the question. TNA needs to concentrate on their own product, not worry about what anybody else is doing, and concentrate on their own homegrown talent.
They do have a lot of great talent.
They have a lot of great homegrown talent, and it just seems that once they get somebody that was in the WWE, they focus on them, and then the homegrown guys kind of get pushed to the background. And then once they get tired of the new, face in the crowd,
Yeah.
they bring back the focus on their homegrown talent, and then another person defects from the WWE, and TNA says, oh wow, we got another new guy. So it's new to them.
There's a lot of guys you never saw before in wrestling until TNA actually came on the air, like AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels.
They've squandered Samoa Joe, who was a homegrown talent there.
Do you think Vince will someday buy up TNA?
I don't think that's going to happen, because the guys that TNA has, especially the rejects or the leftovers from WWE, if Vince wanted them, he would have kept them. And for whatever reason, he's no longer dealing with a guy like Rob Van Dam, Jeff Hardy, Kurt Angle, Hogan.
Yeah, Bully Ray.
Oh, right.
I heard they might be interested in signing him back, but that's a whole other issue right there. You usually see people jumping back and forth between wrestling organizations, even prior to the wrestling war, after. Right now, there's a lawsuit, and until that is settled, as far as I know, nobody's going anywhere. You want to leave the WWE, fine. You're not going to TNA, and vice versa.
Well, so most of the contracts for the talent have non-compete clauses, and there's a certain limitation of when you leave one organization, how long you have to wait until you can actually appear in another organization.
Do you think we'll see Ric Flair back in the WWE?
His non-compete just ran out a couple weeks ago, and Vince McMahon signed Ric Flair's daughter to a developmental deal.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a foot in the door, so to speak, and Flair is in negotiations to go back to.
Ric Flair, who just turned 63, I thought I had read, so he's as old as Bruce Springsteen and Ed McCarver.
Right, and they're still out there.
Yeah.
We're talking with Hollywood J. Williams and John Zimmerman. They have a new show here on NHTV called The Square Circle, seen every Monday
about
night.
every Monday.
They'll be on this Monday live, October 1st, and you can join in the conversation here at 203-234-0025. We have we're here until the top of the hour,
And
so give us a
one
call.
thing I want to stress about their show is not only do they cover the major wrestling federations, but they also cover the indies.
Yeah, maybe we should talk a little bit about the independent shows. You mentioned the giants, WWE and TNA, but the shows that perhaps don't have the financial clout of these, how do they compete?
There are a lot of independent. There are thousands, probably, and all across the country, the world. We have a few around here. We talk about the WWE, we talk about TNA, but a lot of what you're going to see, what the Top Rope talked about, probably still does. I don't really watch them anymore. But what we're going to be talking about a lot is independence. We have NEFW, which does
Our good friend Eric Newton.
Does a lot of shows out of Chicopee, Massachusetts, ran by a good friend of ours named Eric Newton, who we're going to be talking with on the 1st on our show coming up. Another independent league, just literally brand new. I think they've only had maybe 3 cards. A guy named Vinny Viscarello, otherwise known as Vinny V.
Yep, extremely talented wrestling.
It's called ETW, Extremely Talented Wrestling, and they hold cards out of the Boys and Girls Club in Bristol. They have another card coming up soon, I believe.
Yes, that's on the 27th of October.
The 27th of October, and there's an NEFW show on October 13th, I believe.
Yes.
Up in Chicopee. There's some others, Wrestle Jam.
The great thing about the independent scene is that it's somewhere where you're going to see maybe tomorrow's stars today, and
Right.
you can get very up close and personal. A lot of times they're in VFW halls, they're in high school gyms. Most of the independent scenes, they do benefits for different causes, so you're not only seeing talent at a good price, you're seeing up-and-coming guys, and a lot of times some of that money is going to help a good cause.
Very down to earth, and they're very accessible to the fans.
Absolutely.
And you know, Jay, speaking of the independents, you and I just had the opportunity a few weeks back to go to the North Haven Fair.
Oh, yes.
And our good friend Ron Zombie was at the North Haven Fair. I know Ron is out of action currently because he suffered an injury a while back. We have a clip that we're going to go to where Ron addressed the fans in the ring, and then you actually did an interview with him.
Yes, it's Connecticut's hardcore icon. I've known Ron Zombie for a long time, back when we were selling wrestling merchandise at some of the indie shows back in the late 90s, and I can remember one of the greatest feuds on the indie scene was Ron Zombie versus Rex Lethal. And I think one of them actually might have went through that table of ours. I remember the day
at the old Sports Palace.
At the old New Britain Sports Palace, and it scared you and Steve like half to death.
Happened right behind us.
Well, let's check it out.
So if we have that clip, can we go to it, Eric?
Evidently, they're efforting to get that.
As soon as we get that, definitely love to show that. It's some great footage. He addressed the crowd at the North Haven Fair.
Ron Zombie, anytime I've seen him, he's been just a wonderful guy. He's a good guy with the kids. He's a good guy with the fans. You know, willing to take pictures, sign your autographs, and he just gives of himself.
He's a good ambassador to the sport, and we have that clip ready. So
okay, we're going to go to the clip.
North Haven! It's been a long time since I've been in a Northeast ring, and it feels pretty damn good. As my friend said, on March 23rd, in New York, I was injured. I tore my ACL, my MCL, my PCL, and my meniscus. That's a lot of LCLs. Had the surgery on May 31st with cadaver ligaments, so now I truly am a zombie. And everything was a success. It's going to take a full year of rehab to get me back in here, but nothing's going to stop me to come out and kick someone's ass again. First one on my mind is the Northeast champion, Brian Anthony, because I want my belt back. Yeah, you're probably right. Well, I've been coming to this fair since I was probably about their age, being from right next door in East Haven, Connecticut. Bang, bang. And it feels damn good to be here. You guys excited for Northeast Wrestling tonight? So am I. Thank you guys very much from the bottom of my heart. I love everyone here. I appreciate you so very much. And I'll be back in this ring doing what I do best. Give it one more time for Ron Zombie!
I'm standing here next to Connecticut's hardcore icon, Ron Zombie.
Oh, I stood right
Ron.
And as we look at Jason with that interview, I believe we're back on, is what I'm getting from Eric. Yeah, there we are with Ron Zombie. All right, you've had enough, Ron. So I like it. That's a nice effect as we see Mr. Zombie, East Haven's own Ron Zombie,
of course,
in the background. And I do remember on another network when our good friend Eric Schrader hit Zombie with a chair. So
yes,
all in fun a few years ago.
Yep, and I would just want to mention too that your booking agent, yours truly, is in negotiations with Ron Zombie. Hopefully, he will be live in the studio with us on October 15th.
If you can make that happen, that would be great. I would love to talk to Ron one more time.
So we're working on that.
Very
We're just
nice.
trying to get confirmation.
Monday, October 15th at the Squared Circle.
And while we're talking about possibly having future guests from the Powerhouse Wrestling Academy, I'm in negotiations with Joseph von Schmidt, former WWF superstar, and now he runs his own wrestling academy right here in, next door in New Haven. And he's going to have a Halloween bash on Saturday, October 27th at the Boys and Girls Club of Shelton.
And he will also be in the studio on the 1st?
We're in negotiations now. So hopefully, everybody keep your fingers crossed, we'll have Joseph von Schmidt.
And October 8th, Jay, we're going to have Vinny V.
Vinny V from the Extremely Talented Wrestling, going to come down and discuss the card coming up. And so that'll be a good interview too. We interviewed him before on the other show there. So it'll be good.
Everybody needs to remember that the independent scene is much like seeing Bruce Springsteen at the Stone Podium when nobody knew who he was.
Exactly.
You know, and you're going to see guys that are up and coming. The Northeast Wrestling, if you check out Northeast Wrestling, they run a lot in this area, and one of their champions, Matt Taven, just got assigned with a developmental deal for the WWE. So here we were paying $5, $10 to go see these fellas, and maybe next year, 2 years from now, you're going to see them, on your television set, and you can say, "Hey, I remember when, I was in a high school gym and I saw this fella wrestling."
Which kind of, if I may, segues into my next question.
Sure.
And you mentioned about the academy in New Haven and these up-and-coming stars. If someone, say someone in East Haven or North Haven, wants to be the next Ron Zombie or wants to enter the business, where do they get the training, the minor league training, or how does one, if someone physically, wrestled in high school or college and wanted to join the pro ranks, how would they do that?
As I mentioned, the Powerhouse Wrestling Academy in New Haven is a training facility, and you can learn anything from being a wrestler to being a referee to being an announcer, if that's what you want to go for. And they also have an academy up in Waterbury that Velvet Sky, Waterbury resident Velvet Sky, who's now a TNA talent, trained at, and Bull Dredd, who's on the Northeast Wrestling, and recently worked with Hulk Hogan last week. And up in Waterbury, you can get training there. And there's wrestling academies all over the country. And Southern Florida Championship Wrestling is the WWE training ground.
Now, do they have websites, or if you're interested, is
They
there
have Facebook pages, websites. In the days, just punch in Wrestling Academy and you'll find one near you. And if that's your thing, you want to do it, if you're the next WWE superstar, go for it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of sacrifice,
You know,
a lot of commitment.
And like I said, a lot of in the independent shows, the wrestlers are accessible. Ask one of them, hey, you know, I got the build, I got the look, I got the drive, this is what I want to do. How did you get into it? And most of them, you know, it's not a secret society. Most of them want to encourage more talent because they have somebody else to fight against, somebody to wrestle with, and be, you know, comrades and enemies, you know, all in the ring.
Definitely, yeah. It takes a lot of, you know, you pay your dues on the indie scene, and then somebody, you're lucky enough, somebody's eventually going to notice you.
Yeah.
We're talking with John Zimmerman and Hollywood J. Williams from the Squared Circle. I almost said Turnbuckle 2, the Squared Circle. And you could join us here, 203-234-0025.
One question I had with the recent situation with Jerry the King Lawler having a heart attack, do you think that we'll finally see an end to the Hall of Famers getting beat on by these wrestlers today?
I don't think so. I think you'll still. As far as Lawler himself is concerned, you've probably seen his last wrestling match or getting involved in the ring at all. I think he's just pretty much, if he comes back, he's just going to stay at the announce booth. But I don't know. I still think you're going to see Duggan and others, you know, scrapple with the guys of today.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan?
Jim Duggan. Yeah, Hacksaw Jim Duggan was in the ring last Saturday in Fishkill, New York.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a lot of these guys still go out there and do it. This is what they do. They don't want to hang it up. And unfortunately, some of them do get hurt in the ring. And wrestling is a sport where as long as there's a paycheck, you're going to find somebody showing up for it.
It's unfortunate what happened to Lawler, but...
Oh, absolutely. But you know what nobody saw with Jerry Lawler is he was out there every week on the independent scene and doing his thing. And outside of the WWE, he was doing something every week. He had just flown back from an appearance to be on Raw that night. He had wrestled the previous night. And Jerry Lawler was always active in it, and he was in good condition. He was in fit condition.
How old is he?
60.
I'm terrible with dates.
63, I think.
63?
63.
He's up in his 60s. He's, yeah.
You know, I wanted to touch a little bit about the safety of the sport, and actually I wanted to talk about the Owen Hart incident. But in Lawler's case, are they required to take physicals? Is there anything there that the Ric Flairs and Jerry Lawlers of the world have to make sure they're okay?
Like any other business or company, you want to make sure that your employees are safe, that your employees are healthy, your employees are able to do the job that you're contracting them to do. So of course there's a physical involved, there's doctors involved, so you're going to have that aspect. But I mean, people get hurt in nearly every job and every walk of life. That's why we have workman's compensation and
accidents happen,
and OSHA and items like that to hopefully protect us from it. But I mean, things do happen, and like any other activity, I mean, we could walk out here and slip on an ice cube and get hurt.
Right.
So you can't avoid it.
I have to say though, I do commend Michael Cole and the rest of the crew that night for the way they handled that situation.
Yeah, he did the best to keep everybody calm that night. Michael Cole did, and you could just see the look at it. It wasn't an act. You could tell.
Yeah, Michael Cole isn't that good of an actor, so you knew it was genuine. I'm not the biggest Cole fan, but I will give him props for that night, and he did keep his composure and he kept it together.
Yeah.
And
when he put that's when you saw him like put the headset down and you saw a few announcerless matches at the end.
Yes, yeah, it was a class act all the way, and credit where credit's due. Michael Cole did a great job.
And of course, we did see an interview on Raw last night with Jerry the King Lawler.
Yeah, his voice sounds a little raspy because of they had the
breathing tube.
The breathing tube jammed down his throat, and apparently that's the effect it has on you when they take the breathing tube out. Your voice is so. It's, you know.
I think the updates are great because the fans are concerned, you know, and we do watch every week, and he is somebody that, you know, is beloved.
Oh, yeah.
And he's been around for so many years. I mean, he is Jerry the King.
Yeah.
And they call him that for a reason, you know. And, you know, by showing the updates, some people might say it's exploiting him. No, you know, it's keeping us informed.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like a family member. You tune into Raw and you listened back in the day to Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler. Now it's Michael Cole and Jerry the King Lawler. You know, and to hear about something like that happening, it's upsetting to a viewer too.
And John, I think you mentioned too, and I remember you made this quote a couple of weeks ago, and it was the beginning of Monday Night Football, and they wanted to check the ratings, and I think Monday Night Raw, I think probably defeated Monday Night Football as far as the ratings. Just the enormous popularity of the product.
The dedicated fan base is there, and they do, you know, 52 live Raw shows every year. They do 52 SmackDown tapings every year. They do house shows, and they do the Saturday morning show.
Yeah.
And so not only do you have the fans showing up on a weekly basis, twice, 3 times a week, 16 pay-per-views a year, showing up for that, and the tens of thousands. You know, WrestleMania is 20,000 people, and it stretched out to a full weekend now with the fan access and all that. So you do have a great, enormous audience.
I wanted
for
to
the
mention
product.
about the pay-per-views,
Yes.
because when I was younger, it was
That was a long time ago.
It was Royal Rumble in the winter, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and I think one other one. I think there was only 4.
Survivor Series.
Survivor Series, yeah.
Series
Yeah.
was the night before Thanksgiving, or actually it was on Thanksgiving to
Thanksgiving.
begin
Yeah.
with. And then you had Royal Rumble in January, you had WrestleMania in April, and SummerSlam in August. But now you got a pay-per-view once a month.
And
More
then
than
it
once
doesn't,
a month.
it
More
doesn't
than
get
once a
watered
month.
down?
I believe it gets watered down. I said on the Squared Circle, on the initial show, that with 3 hours of Raw every Monday, 2 hours of SmackDown, 16 pay-per-views, it all just jumbles into one at some point. It's just so much content, and if you're watching it all, the pay-per-view isn't special anymore.
No.
It used to be.
Each TNA runs a pay-per-view once a month.
Right.
too.
Well, we won't even get into
you're talking
competing pay-per-views.
You're talking 24 pay-per-views a year.
Right, or more.
Or more sometimes.
And
I mean, we used to have WrestleMania parties when my kid was
right, and it
Sunday
used to be,
afternoon.
WrestleMania was the World Series
Super
or the
Bowl.
Super Bowl
Yeah.
Yes.
of
I agree.
the wrestling world. And now with a pay-per-view every 6 weeks or less, it's 16 a year. So I mean, do the math, right? It seems like it's just another day. It's another show, and the build-up between this pay-per-view to the next pay-per-view is so short that you don't get any drama. You don't get what it used to be like, the expectation, like, I want to see this. And the numbers have dropped on sales, but because they have so many, it holds, as far as dollar value, it still holds true to have them. To have these events.
They're making money off of it, so it's
Right,
not really
the money
gonna
is
go
there,
away.
but I think if you were to cut down even 3 or 4 less, you would have more buys on the ones that you have, and it would make those times more special. If we
What's a pay-per-view cost now? What is...
WrestleMania runs about $50, $60.
No,
at least.
WrestleMania is $100 in HD. WrestleMania is $100 in
In
HD.
I didn't pay that much for it, but
Wow.
Yes. Well, it depends on your Comcast
Right,
or your cable provider. Excuse me.
But it is
Right.
they triple figures, so...
Yeah,
Wow.
and then just the regular monthly one is like $49.99, $50, and it gets to be expensive if you were to
Oh, yeah.
purchase all of the WWE ones. I mean, you can. That's a car payment,
Yeah.
quite honestly.
Absolutely.
oh yeah,
I'm glad
definitely.
my son doesn't watch wrestling anymore.
We've been going to a local establishment and watching them right there.
Oh yeah,
That's a
you
great.
save a lot of money. All you gotta do is just you can just buy a glass of soda if you want. If you don't even have to eat anything.
Yeah,
And
check
go to
your
this.
check your websites, check your areas. I know a lot of the local establishments will run a special. They'll have the pay-per-view on, so you go in, you have your dinner. So even if you were to spend the $50 at the restaurant.
Yeah.
You're getting something more than the pay-per-view. Plus, you're there with an audience that's there to see it. People are clapping, people are cheering and booing at the, and you're there with, a like-minded audience.
Nice.
And it adds to it rather than just the four of us sitting at, your house watching it, and we'd still have to purchase food, pizza or Chinese or whatever and bring it in.
I still think I'm going to have my WrestleMania party next year at home, though, because that's just a special thing I do.
And in some
And is it true?
areas-
I've got two quick questions.
sure.
We've got less than 4 minutes.
Sure.
Is it true that The Undertaker only wrestles on WrestleMania once a year?
That's been the case lately,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I always loved The
Nowadays.
Undertaker. So.
You might see him here or there, but I mean, the WrestleMania is his crowning achievement.
And very quickly, I wanted to get both you gentlemen's opinion in a short amount of time.
Sure.
Mickey Rourke's movie, The Wrestler, authentic, good for the sport. His performance was outstanding.
I'd say it's unfortunate that sometimes that is the case with some. I wouldn't say it's the case with every single ex superstar.
There was a documentary called Beyond the Mat, and a portion of it focused on Jake the Snake Roberts. And a lot of the story of Jake the Snake Roberts you can see in the movie Mickey Rourke,
Really?
The Wrestler. And it mirrors it, as far as fighting in the VFW hall and using a bucket instead of a restroom. And this is what you got in your dressing room was just the back room, sometimes a broom closet.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the guys that were on top and selling out at Madison Square Garden still have that in their head that, this is what they want to be and this is how they want to do. And it goes back to your question before of, how old is too old? And as I said, as long as there's a paycheck and, the guys at the VFW hall are paying $10 a head, and $15 to get your autograph and $20 to get your a picture taken with you, the guys are showing up.
And they still love you.
Yeah. The fans are showing up and they're handing you money. And it's hard for almost anybody, especially nowadays, to turn down that payday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
It's money.
Boy, this hour went by quick.
This went by quick.
Flew by. It flew by.
We want to
Let's do another hour.
Sure.
Okay with our studio audience?
I'm prepared.
thank our guests for joining us tonight, and just a reminder: tune into the Squared Circle Monday evening, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. As we say, Raw's on after you, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
You're not on
before Raw's on after us.
And tentatively, Edward,
Yes.
we are supposed to be back here next Tuesday.
Yes.
But I am waiting for confirmation from our guests, so we will keep you posted on that.
Great.
But I know not this coming weekend, but the weekend after, you and I will be doing our usual haunt in Wallingford.
Yep. The yearly event in our sister town, Wallingford, Celebrate Wallingford, going on this year. I don't know. I think it's been going on since 1987. We've been doing it on and off for almost 10 years or so. So in the 30 seconds we have remaining, we should thank our guests, Hollywood J. Williams, John Zimmerman, our very fine studio audience, even the young man that booed me
Squared
before.
Circle, Monday night, 7 o'clock.
And we'll see you next Tuesday.
All right.
Thank you.
Have
Good
a
night, everybody.
That was good.
Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Turn your dial to cable 18. You will see the best in TV. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Sit back and listen. You will hear the best conversation of the year. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom.